So hi, I'm Matt Lynn and I'm here with Rosemary Salway. Rosemary, can we have a bit of a chat about the work we've done together over the course of a long time?
Yes.
And it's really just, I don't know, just share some stories and maybe some of, what motivated you and what you got out of our work together. Someone else might be able to, connect with, and it might help them in some way, shape or form. So, do you remember when we first started working together?
I think it was 2013.
Was it?
Yes. That long ago.
And do you know what the motivation was?
Yes, I had a financial planning business, and I didn't want to have a financial planning business anymore.
Why not? Do you know?
It just wasn't sitting with me anymore. Yeah, I was starting to lose faith in the industry and in my ability to do my job well.
Right. Okay. And how long do you feel like you were feeling like that? Like, was it sort of just an overnight kind of experience, or did it build up for a period of time? Do you know?
I think when I started seeing you, it was only at the very beginning of it. Because we then dealt another 5 years of me having to get myself out of that business. So, No, I think it was at the beginning. And it was because a friend of mine had been coming to you and he was a financial advisor and you had been a financial advisor. So it kind of just felt like, oh, great. And I am the kind of person who enjoys having somebody to talk to.
Right.
To get it all out of my head.
So you made a pretty quick decision in the sense of when it was a bit uncomfortable for you, you just didn't want to sit with that forever. You wanted to take some sort of action.
You remember I came to one of your one-day workshops down at Rafferty's, having never met you, and you went, how come you're here? You don't know me.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, Steve.
Yeah.
And then it was because of that I went, okay, you can be my person that I can chat to.
Okay. I think, if I recall correctly, I think that workshop you felt, didn't really do that much for you.
I don't even remember what it was about. I have not the slightest idea what it was about.
Oh, look, back then, I did put in the effort to get some feedback form. At the end, you do it. The standard kind of experience where, you have your day together, and at the end, you fill out your survey. I don't really do.
Was I any good?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And when the ego is sort of, very curious, it's kind of, did I get a 5 out of 5, a 4 out of 5, a 3 out of 5? And I think I might have got a 2 out of 5 or something from you that day. And so I think I was a little bit surprised when you decided afterwards that, let's catch up and see what we can do. But sometimes that is, of course, that sometimes that's the experience, that depending on what the piece of content is that we're talking about, whether that sort of really resonates or not. And even some of the people that, I'm curious about what they have to share, sometimes I'll share something and it doesn't kind of hit as much as some other things, but you can kind of feel that, there's something in the relationship which is of value.
Yes, there's something more to it.
And just to clarify, I think the financial planning, there's, lots of value that can be had for people that offer that service or receive that service. But for you, the time, it wasn't sitting comfortably for you anymore, was it?
And especially right at the end, when I finally sold it, I just was completely losing faith in my clients and their attitudes to money. And it just, having done the yoga teacher training and the tapping and everything else that I did, that just didn't fit anymore.
All right.
I just couldn't really deal with the lack of gratitude for what people had.
Right. So what do you mean by that? Because I know that your clients meant a lot to you. So when you say you sort of lost faith in them in some ways, are you meaning that you felt like you couldn't have the conversations, you couldn't break through with your clients in terms of building or refining their relationship with money? Is that what you're talking about there? What do you mean?
Yes, perhaps I didn't think it was... I didn't have the energy left to then change the conversation to that different view on money.
Right.
And I wonder whether I'm the person to have had that conversation with them anyway.
Well, that's what I was curious about. Do you feel like it was even your role, like you were possibly engaged to assist in a certain way, and where you got to is the way you wanted to support was possibly looking a bit different from, even the function that the original agreement or commitment was made under.
Yeah. So I'd always had a really close relationship with them. In fact, an hour meeting would be 45 minutes shooting the breeze, loving them and checking in on their life, and 45 minutes would be on, we've got to look at your portfolio. And the level of trust that they had with me was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, really blessed to have had that. But when you have wealthy clients say to you, our situation is dire.
Right.
And I'm not a very good poker face. And I just looked at it and go, what? And I mean, they realised in the end, but I think that was actually the pivotal comment from a wealthy couple with guaranteed income. Our situation is dire, and I just went, I'm done.
Yeah, right.
I can't. You're getting nearly $100,000 a year tax free, and your situation is dire. I can't do this anymore.
And where do you think that relationship comes from in terms of that relationship with wealth? On two sides of it, for you, in the sense that, to be grateful to have enough, relative to somebody who, is obviously having emotional difficulties that, the $100,000 of guaranteed income, that there's still fear, that there's still fear in that person's system. So where do you feel like your relationship comes from, in the sense of, enough's enough? And do you think that's experience? Do you think that's just a natural part of, your nature?
I think I've had every extreme of it.
In terms of your life, personally?
In terms of my life. So my dad was a minister. Yeah. We didn't have a lot of money, but we always had everything we needed. We never went without. We never had flash stuff, but we were always really well fed, and we always had clothing, and we always played sport. So in that, and then when I was married, we had a business, so we had miles of money. Right. BMWs and the overseas trips, and so I went through that, and that didn't last very long, did it? Because that was divorce. And then I had no money again. Right. Living on a single parent pension. Yeah. But the kids always had everything they needed. And actually I had more money when I had no money, because I was more mindful of how I spent it. Yeah. And the kids always had what they needed. Yeah. And I remember my daughter wanted to be in a rep basketball team, and it was going to cost another $20 a week, and she was 9, and I said to her, I don't have another $20 a week. And if you're that good, you'll be that good in a year or two, and maybe by then we'll have some more money. Yeah. So that was the only time I had to say, we don't have. Right. Apart from that, we just always had what we needed. Yeah. And then when I had the business, again, I didn't have any money because I started with no clients and no money. And it takes about 5 years in small business to start making a profit. So I just lived really frugally, but I always had everything. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So really your personal experiences of getting by without a lot of income and still being able to provide to the people around you. And then the extreme of, being married and having all the money you could see. French champagne all the time. Yeah, okay. It sort of seems that at a deeper level, it didn't make that much difference to you. No. At a practical level, sure, you had to be more mindful, and unfortunately it got to that point where $20 a week was too much and some decisions needed to be made. But in terms of, the deeper richness of life, it didn't matter. No, not in the slightest.
And I guess with that background, when you start to have a look at somebody who's fearful when they actually have quite a lot of resources, that was conflicting for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
what frustrated me too was that they would expect that I would make their portfolio perform better,
All right.
but they wouldn't for a moment consider looking at their spending.
All right. Yeah.
So it was no personal responsibility for how the money was managed on their side,
Yeah.
and all of it came to me to
Right.
get them a better return.
Okay. All
So
right.
I'm just going, no, that don't work.
Yeah. Okay.
We can only do so much with the money. It's actually your responsibility.
Yeah, I think sometimes that happens when somebody engages in a professional advisor, that it's not always a collaborative joint type of effort towards outcomes. It's kind of like somebody's engaged to do a job.
Yes.
And and that sort of absolves the responsibility sometimes for both people to be participating in terms of, making changes or working towards a common goal. I've seen that quite a bit. All right, so you came along and you were a little bit dissatisfied.
Yes.
And I can relate to that. I remember many years ago I woke up and I saw the world through a lens, which is kind of like, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing out there, Thankfully, over the course of time with the work I've done on me, I don't really look through that lens anymore, which is, I think, a wonderful recognition of what's possible in terms of personal development. So I took you for, we worked together for many years actually to support you through that, dissatisfaction with the business. Do I sell? Do I not sell? How do I do it? Who to? And even though that, you're the story that you've shared, you're disappointed with that, that client experience, you still felt deeply for the welfare of your clients.
Totally.
So, to just be able to, sell the business off to the highest bidder wasn't really your approach, and certainly wasn't the way you wanted to do things. So when we worked together, what do you think was helpful? Why did you decide to, hang around after the first meeting? Because, some things are challenging, and sometimes we don't get the result that we want, first attempt. And, so, what do you think was helpful?
Yeah, I think the different perspective that you provided, and because you'd been a financial advisor, I didn't have to explain myself so much in that field. So you got all my issues because you had the same. So that just got rid of one layer of complexity.
Yeah.
And then it worked out pretty quickly, I guess, because you realised I was on the spiritual path. It became less about business so much, and just so much. Well, all of it was all about me and my development and how I would manage it. And you never let me off the hook. Damn.
What do you? Well, a couple of things.
What do I mean by that?
Well, no, you're quite right. Is that we might have, the catalyst to start might have been business related, but it wasn't. There was plenty of times that wasn't the dominant topic in conversations.
Oh, hardly ever.
Because really, what we're doing with business or what we're not doing with business is a reflection on how we're going within ourselves, and whether we feel that what we're doing through business is actually helping us support our highest priorities at different stages of life as well, and that had shifted for you.
Oh, totally.
5 years earlier, different story, but you were coming into a new chapter.
Yeah.
What do you mean by it never let you off the hook?
Well, I can't really give you any specific examples. I
haven't really heard you say that before, though, in that way.
No. I knew that you wouldn't just accept what I said as the end of the story.
Okay.
So it was really always delving into the thought process to a point where then I could look at it myself.
Right. Yeah.
And see it more clearly.
Yeah.
And once the yoga practice had become such an important part of my life, nearly the first question every time we met was, and how's your practice?
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, that was good because I was pretty committed straight up because it had had such a huge impact on me.
Yeah.
But it's still good to be accountable to, well, are you doing these things that you know serve your being? Are you doing them before we get into anything else that's coming up? So that was really good. It helped me on track.
Yeah.
And it's because of you that I became a yoga teacher.
Right.
From one practice that you gave me, and I'm doing the practice at home and suddenly I'm crying. And I said to you, there's something more to this. And you went, go do that. And I went, okay.
You didn't want to do that practice to start with, if I recall.
I did not want to do that practice. It was very confronting. And that's one of the things about not letting me off the hook.
Oh, I see.
That was a crazy confronting practice. Not anybody else wouldn't find it, but you knew me and you knew, and it was very challenging, and yet it was incredibly powerful as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's so awesome about how you worked with me, was that you do get to know people really well, and you have a sense of what could help them open up a bit.
Yeah.
And you would comment that you'd noticed how I'd softened over the years.
Yeah, and I think I've shared that feedback with you, and I do. When we first caught up, I feel like you're working really hard to make it all work, you know, and that takes a tremendous amount of energy.
Huge.
But where often that's driven from is the intellect, you know. And I always perceived a really soft and nurturing, you know, naturally caring person, you know. And sometimes that drive was sort of overtaking that other aspect, you know.
Completely.
And you're in an industry which was very intellectually orientated as well. It can still be heart-based, but it is quite a intellectual field. That I remember offering that practice to you, and it was really about softening down and kind of the opposite of what you had built some security on, you know, being a single mum, and you know, and the fortitude and the fight that needs to come with that. So it was really amazing to be able to, you know, be a part of that.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Because in the working between two, I had 3 attempts to sell that business.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about today. So we led me through 2 where I'd sold the business and had to take it back. So that's like the ultimate roller coaster.
Yeah.
And you guided me all through that. In the middle of all that, I got divorced. There was like all the major changes were all happening at once. My dad died. Like it all happened.
Yeah.
And I know that if I hadn't had you there, I would have been floundering.
Right.
So it was a really important, just to know that there was this little anchor there, that if I felt a little bit off keel, Matt, it's time for a meeting. Although I think we met nearly fortnightly for years.
Yeah.
And then went to monthly.
Yeah. Yeah, look, sometimes we go through chapters when we sort of seem to be taking on all the challenges, right? And you had a fair run there. You know, and passing of parents, and you know, and decisions about, you know, some of the most personal relationships, such as separation, and separation from business too. You know, something you put your heart and soul into for a long time, and you know, something which that a lot of people can gain a sense of purpose and value from, to move away from that. No, it's hard. Yeah, it's big stuff. I was really for me it's always a pleasure to work with somebody, you know, in times of change, and when they're just looking for clarity or looking to move through a chapter. So thank you for trusting me through all of that.
Yeah, you
so
deserved it.
So what's next for you?
I'm retired. Happily retired. Now I get to do the things I love, which is teach yoga. Soon to be able to teach meditation and do my tapping.
Yeah, and ride your bike.
And ride my bike a lot.
Yeah. And see your grandchildren.
And see my grandchildren, yeah. My life is perfect.
Good on you. Well, it was perfect before. It was just that it had its challenges in it, right? So, which gave opportunity for learning. Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to share? Like maybe someone can relate to some of what you've talked about. Maybe a bit disillusioned in business, and I'd just like to clarify that when a person becomes a bit disillusioned in business, it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with the business.
No.
All that's happening is the shifting preferences within the individual is starting to move out of alignment with the industry or the business or something that they may have previously been in. So it actually means very little about the industry or the business. It's just that we can start to become a little bit critical or a little bit less engaged because what we're really supposed to be doing is changing. It's time for us to actually take on a different project or to work with people in a different way, which is really what's happened for you, and it's what happened for me through the different career changes I've made over the years as well, which are really hard. They're really hard.
Well, they're challenging because you become pretty attached to who you are as this person.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, I don't quite know who I'll be if I'm not that.
Yeah.
So that's part of what you help. And it took 5 years to sell that business.
Yeah.
And it worked out that actually I wasn't ready to sell it the first time. And you helped me find the way to be more true to myself without foregoing any of what I gave the client. It just meant I could turn up more as me, not, there's Rosemary, the financial advisor. So my dress softened and things became a little bit more relaxed and the clients became more and more engaged, which was really interesting. So I think the more I let go, the more it just flowed. And you used to tell me that and I didn't believe you because I'm the ultimate control freak and had to hold on to everything because if I didn't hold on to it, it was all going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And that's where I was when I met you, having to hold everything so tightly. And through the work realised that the more and more I could just allow, it all just kept happening.
Yeah.
Like it all just happened anyway and I didn't have all the angst attached to it.
Yeah.
So it was fascinating. And I was pleasantly surprised when you were able to help me through the relationship breakdown.
Right.
That wasn't an area I had any expectation that you could be helpful. But because you're working with the person and not the circumstance they're in so much, then it doesn't matter what the circumstance is because you were helping me find clarity about what was important, what was true for me, how I wanted to be in the world. So it doesn't matter what the trigger to come is.
No. Yeah, look, I think it's a good point in the sense with the business is that, sometimes, in many cases actually, there's no need to actually sell the business or move away from the business. Probably for most people I work with, there's no need for that at all. What they do need to explore is, am I turning up authentic? All right, or am I taking on the image or the impression of how I'm supposed to be in this field? And that's hard when you're sort of not authentic. It takes a lot more energy.
It does. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Especially if you have a sensitive system. If your system's quite sensitive, it's really hard to fake it for the sake of a profit or the sake of a position or something like this. So yeah, look, obviously you had a feeling that it was time to get out, you know, in those early stages, but it wasn't really. It was time for you to explore, can I do this in a different way which is more suitable for me? And then over the course of time, it was discovered that it was time for a change. And that goes with any sort of relationship. You know? It can even go with a relationship that, you know, we have with food, for example. You know, in one decade, something might feel appropriate, and the decade after, you know, what we used to be pretty comfortable with, or, you know, alcohol consumption or hobbies, sometimes social relationships, personal relationships. I think it's always appropriate to look at our own sort of setup first, and then respectfully and you know, with consideration, we have a look at you know, what's right for us to move forward with. Okay. So given all of that, if there's somebody that watches this video, I don't know if anyone ever watches these things anyway, but if someone's watching this video and they're at a stage where, you know, business is a bit difficult for them, or career's a bit difficult, and they're feeling a bit maybe disillusioned, would that be a fair word?
Yes.
Yeah, disillusioned.
And exhausted.
And tired?
Just mentally exhausted from trying to get up every day, put your best hat on, put your best self forward, hold it all together. It's exhausting.
So what would you say to them?
I'd say that it's money well spent. And quite often we're fearful about spending money, especially if business is a little bit tough. But the time and the money is so worthwhile, because it does give you the clarity that you just can't get yourself.
Right.
And because you've come from business.
Oh, you're talking about me personally?
Well, no, you're helpful because you've come from business, and you've come from corporate kind of understanding, and you've come from the yoga spiritual path as well. So it means that you can guide people like me who actually ended up being very strongly on that path. Yeah. And yet you had people who still sat in that room at the table. You know, you weren't the ones who came and sat on meditation cushions in your meditation room. So you don't have to say, oh, I can only work with you if you've got these ideas, and I can only work with you if you come here, because you're able to work with whoever for whatever reason. And the puppy dog loves you. We all love you. No, it's absolutely worth it, just to be able to find a bit of peace. So the peacefully productive, I don't know whether you've dropped that, have you?
I've just put purposeful with it as well.
Yeah, it's such a great tagline for what you provide, because we do get really caught up in how hard it is, and it doesn't have to be. And that's where you came in for me, was to just help me find the peace in it. And then it naturally went to the place, well, okay, I know who I am now, I found my peace, that doesn't serve me any longer, so it's time for that to go. Right. So I wasn't doing it in anger or frustration or I can't do this anymore. It was, okay, well, this is who I am, this is what's important to me, and actually that doesn't fit anymore. So it's time that went.
So it's more about just let me just go back one step. Like for me, I prefer people not to make any knee-jerk reaction type decisions. So we become less reactive and more responsive, and to be conscious about the decisions that we make, to be compassionate and considerate of the people around us when we make decisions.
It's kind of opening up the space so that you've got an opportunity to actually think straight.
Right. Okay. So I think that's sort of the nuts and the bolts, isn't it? Right. So if a person's feeling or can relate to some of what you've shared in terms of feeling a bit out of sorts with work, they're creating some space, whether it's with somebody like me or whether it's, I don't know, somebody who lives close to them or whatever, just to open up some space in the schedule to have a look at what's really going on. You know, and one of the things which I think is really important to have a look at, well, what are the desires really? And are those desires sensible for what it is that's actually really important? Or are they just kind of a bit of a distraction that need to be released? And you're quite correct, it can be quite difficult to see them for yourself because most people haven't been trained to be able to do that, and most people keep themselves busy trying to solve it through achieving stuff externally.
That's right.
You know, so yeah, okay. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for helping all these years.
You're welcome. All right, that's a wrap.
It's a wrap.